Jesse Appel, a Fulbright scholar, stand-up comedian, and a Jewish American from Boston.
What I'd like to do is find a way that we can use comedy to improve intercultural communication, just showing Americans and Chinese together, living their lives together, being funny together.
His idealism would propel him to spend years to learn how to crack jokes in Chinese.
谢谢你们来今天晚上娱乐活动。
And his talents would prompt him to start and finish a funny music video in just a few days.
Taco 是老外 style， 老外 style。大哥是长期住在北京的老外，每天吃中国菜也不会有少吃的老外。
That went viral instantly. So now, what's next?
So we have now that multicultural and multilingual group of comedians that run out of my comedy club in Beijing, the U.S.-China Comedy Center. We have shows, we have 12 events a month. We do lots of great stuff in that area, and it's actually happening.
How did Jesse pull it off? Who are his audience? What's funny in China? I'm Mabel Chan, and this is One in a Billion. What makes people in China laugh? The first time I saw my team, mostly 20-something Chinese and Americans, laughing out loud, we were working together in my home office in New York 6 years ago. They were watching Jesse in a video, acting out Lao Wai style.
可是那种老外被朋友封为 K 歌之王那种老外，在清华研究中国文化那种老外，觉得眼睛啤酒本来好喝的那种老外，大哥那老外。
Lao Wai, that's a Chinese slang for outsiders or foreigners. That video was an overnight hit. That happened during Jesse's first year in Beijing. He knew how Chinese people looked at him as a foreigner with lots of questions, like, who are you? Where are you from? And what are you doing here? Everything that made him stand out in China gave him ideas how to be funny.
大哥是老外 style。
Like putting himself in the middle of public places in Beijing, crowded restaurant, traffic intersection, subway platform, and acting like no one else is watching. But lots of Chinese people were watching. They were clueless what he was doing. But it didn't take long for everyone to catch on. They started following him, dancing and laughing along on the streets or in the park. That video was a huge success. It got hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube and other social media platforms. But that wasn't exactly why Jesse went to China to be a one-hit wonder. He was a fresh college graduate from Brandeis, a Fulbright scholar with a serious academic and career interest in studying xiangsheng. What is xiangsheng?
Xiangsheng, which is a traditional Chinese stand-up comedy. The closest thing that we have to it in the United States, I think, is the Abbott and Costello Who's on First sketch.
Crazy about baseball. Will you stand still?
A lot of the Xiangsheng pieces are designed around explaining parts of Chinese history. It's a sort of like a street comedy. It has its origins in street performance, actually. The work, it's simultaneously lowbrow and cultured. It's simultaneously modern and ancient. Chinese is not easy. I sometimes wonder if I knew what I had signed myself up for when I had first gone to study abroad, whether I would have done it. Just coming to a place that's so different and then having the language barrier initially, while it was very, it was a little bit of a struggle to get through in the first couple months. Looking back, I almost look at that as a great opportunity, because coming in and being able to absorb everything, I feel gave me a more rounded view of the country and the culture as a whole.
That was 6 years ago. A lot has changed since then. A new president in China, a new president in America. Both countries are locked in a trade war. Does he still believe in the power of comedy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do. I definitely do. I think, it's been something like 6 years since we did that interview. And it's funny because just this last week, We finished wrapping up a pilot for a comedy sketch show. Before I came here to the States, we recorded about half of it, and then my Chinese co-writers and co-creators have finished the second half of it this last week or so. We've been trying to make it for so long. It's been a goal of ours to be able to do. In terms of whether the comedy can be used to bring people together, I mean, I think over the last 6 years, I found that it can, and that the difficulties are actually less in the comedy and more in the structure of how you get that comedy in front of somebody.
So how is he allowed to do comedy shows in China? Isn't that a media business?
To some degree, we're allowed to do it because it's a small scale. How to bring it to more people, even if the product is good enough to make more people happy, how to get it to them is the difficult part.
So that's exactly what I wanted to drill down. Name one thing that you've built. You've done so many. Name one thing or one show that you're most proud of and say, this is really what I came to China to do.
That's interesting. I mean, one show that I'm really proud of. It's hard to pin it down to one because I think I expected when I came there that it would be about the show, when in some ways it's about the process of making the show, meeting the Chinese people that are trying to do stand-up in Chinese, to be part of the Chinese stand-up scene.
How did you meet people? They're all Chinese?
Yeah, in the Chinese scene. There was an English expat scene as well, but I was referring to the Chinese scene for Chinese audience. And so it's been ironically easier to keep up on where these people are, even now as the scene has expanded and there might be 200, 300 people that really do stand up in China now. But I kind of know all of them or am 1 degree removed from all of them because I was there so early in the Chinese scene.
Did you do that on the ground in China? You know, just to describe how difficult it was to get information, right? In terms of Wi-Fi, internet.
Oh, I mean, that was never the issue. Like we couldn't get on the internet. The issue was that you have this crowd of Chinese people who are ambitious in the sense of they see something from the West, whether it's an online show, Chris Rock, George Carlin, Russell Peters, stand-up comedians. These people, the 7 or 8 people that were doing in 2012 are the people that really knew what stand-up was, and they wanted to do this Western art. And then you had me, who is coming from a background of knowing that art at a level that they didn't because I grew up with it, but also not having the experience because I'm not Russell Peters, I'm not George Carlin. I was learning just as they were learning, but I was learning coming from a different background and also with very bizarre different handicaps in speaking the language as a second language and obviously being, not Chinese.
And they all are.
Yeah.
Humor is impossible to translate.
I don't believe that.
Yes, tell me more. How did you do it?
Well, I think first, a lot of people have the question about translating humor. First of all, it's not the goal to necessarily translate comedy. If I have a joke, I have something funny in my head, I want to get it into your head, right? So I need to come up with a way to get you to understand that. Part of it is words, part of it is physicality, part of it's timing, part of it's making the room into a funny room by just not making people nervous and just relaxing everybody. So all of these things, really the only one that has to do with quote unquote translating is the language. If you're a Chinese speaker, I'm probably going to have to use Chinese to do that if I speak Chinese.
And you do that very well.
So if you're somebody roughly my age, you might have one set of experiences. If you're older than me, you have a different set of experiences and references. I need to figure out which of these I can tap into in order to get what's funny in my head into your head. And so I'm not writing a joke in English and then running it through a translator in order to do it in Chinese.
How do you test it out? I mean, you say you're writing it, but
Sure.
When you hit the ground, in the first year or two, you're not writing at home and then practicing it out. What do you do? How do you actually practice and observe?
You kind of do. If I'm having a conversation with you now and I say something and you laugh, I should write it down. Just as that simple. If it worked in a real conversation, that's at least enough of a reason to write it down. And then if I have an open mic tonight where I have, 5 minutes on stage to say whatever I want and try out new jokes. I'll start with a minute or two of stuff that I know is going to work so the audience will get going. And I'll have a minute to end with so that in case there are any people there from television and I'll leave them thinking I'm professional because in the beginning and the end it'll look good. And then the middle I can do whatever I want. So I'll go into my phone and I'll say what's made people laugh recently or what did I think was funny recently, and I'll put those into jokes. Sometimes I actually write out specific sequences of words. Oftentimes, the purpose of that open mic is to run through it on the stage and then try to connect with the audience to feel what they think is funny about this idea. And a lot of times, because I have a background in improv as well, I'm a little bit more comfortable letting that moment happen through improv. But once I have the moment, I want to get the word set. So once I use the improv, I get the laugh, I say, ooh, that's where it is. That's where the laugh is. And then I'll try to write that down either in my head or on paper.
2 years ago, Jesse opened a U.S.-China comedy center.
欢迎大家来到我们 Comedy Club China， 今天来给你们说一段中文脱口秀，希望大家都可以喜欢。饿吗？放进那个豆芽旁边，帮我吃一下吧。
We're in a courtyard in Beijing near the Drum Tower. It's a comedy space. We sit about 50, 55 people for shows. We have English, Chinese, and bilingual comedy, stand-up, improv, 相声, like crosstalk comedy. We do workshops. We do corporate trainings. The people who come to our club are people who are mostly Chinese, except for the English shows, in which case is about 50-50 Chinese and non-Chinese. And they're people that are interested in seeing live comedy, which is to say, hearing things you can't see on the TV or won't see on the TV, getting to know the people and performers. Like, they really like the idea of, like, they like Jesse. They see Jesse in a show. They want to see Jesse in another show.
Do you change clothes?
I wear different clothes every day. Because and then I wash the clothes in between.
Between the acts.
No, not between the acts. We have a comedy club t-shirt that we wear for the improv show. So everybody in the troupe will wear the same comedy club t-shirt. And then for stand-up, I generally just wear whatever. I mean, it's a little bit...
So the audience are what? The millennials?
We tend to get a little bit of a younger audience, probably I'd say 20 to 35 or 40. That being said, like, especially for our interactive workshops, we actually do get people who are older, 40s, 50s even. We've had one occasion last month where one 60-year-old woman brought her 20-year-old daughter.
What are their incentives of learning humor? To them, is that a necessity?
I think for regular Chinese people, everyday Chinese people, there's a sense that they're a little bit closed in or introverted. I think that going to a cultural event that's fun is easier than like taking a hardcore public speech class, for instance. Some people are attracted by the fact that we have foreigners and there are bilingual or English elements to what we do, and they do it for language. Some people are interested in the comedy styles because they love comedy. And then if you're not into variety shows in China, there's not a lot of comedy for you. So if you like stand-up or you like improv and you want to find the authentic place, if you step in my building, you know this is the authentic place and you can feel it immediately.
And how did you grow? Is it word of mouth?
We grew by partially by word of mouth, partially by working with other groups. So I've been in China doing comedy for 4 years when I started the center. So I knew the English, the Chinese improv scenes, the stand-up scenes. My master, Ding Laoshi, and all of his students, disciples are our xiangsheng bits, our xiangsheng people. We've gone to international festivals. So we go to Manila Improv Festival every year and we can invite them to perform, or if they have a performer in, we'll teach them for a workshop.
As an American, one of the first things that Jesse did early on to be liked was to dramatize his personal experiences with stereotypes.
So I definitely feel like I've been more aware of stereotypes after moving to China, both Chinese stereotypes towards Americans and then also American stereotypes about Chinese people. And I'll give you a little bit of an example of this. I want to introduce you to somebody. This is Mrs. Cui. And the first time that I met Mrs. Cui, I was going over to her house. And she hands me a banana and she says, eat the banana. And I was like, well, that's nice of you. Thank you very much. She's like, eat the banana. I'm like, no, that's very nice. Eat the banana. It's not an option. And I was like, well, I didn't know what to do. You know, I didn't want to eat the banana, and she's kept offering me the banana. And in her mind, there could be only one reason why I wouldn't eat this banana. She looked at the banana, and she looked at me, and then she said, I guess Americans don't eat bananas. Like, no, that's not true. And I was like, no, this is terrible. But it was even worse because I realized this is how stereotypes start. It's like I have now just stereotyped Americans as a race of banana-hating people. We're just like a whole 300 million banana haters on that side of the ocean.
And he play off of what people assumed about him or expected of him.
In America, everybody assumes you speak perfect English no matter what you look like. And everybody assumes you know what the Super Bowl is, and everybody knows that you know what barbecue is and you know about America. And then if you reveal, oh, I'm not from here, I don't know that word, then you go from 100 points of America to 90 to 80 or whatever. In China, it's the exact opposite. You start at 0. Everybody assumes you know nothing.
You meaning
as a foreigner, especially if you look like a white foreigner, you're doing anything regarding China.
They assume you're dumb.
They don't assume you're dumb. They assume you know nothing about China. And you don't speak the language. You have no idea. You can't use chopsticks. You can't do anything. That people don't judge you for that. It's just the way the world is, right? The Chinese people know about China, and foreigners
if you don't look like them.
Yeah, a defining feature is if you don't look like us, you couldn't possibly know unless you reveal that you know through some sort of situation. So like, let's say, another person might say, I'm married to a Chinese American or something like that. Then people would say, I can maybe understand how you know something about China now. But you need to take it up really slowly. You reveal that I can use chopsticks. Oh, wow, that's impressive. You got up to 5 points. I speak a little bit of Chinese, ni hao. Oh, you know ni hao. They don't assume you know the language. They assume you know ni hao.
So what would he do exactly to shake these things up?
So sometimes I like to blast that system out of the water by saying, the people say like, how long have you been in China? And I say, 我在中国待了6年多了啊嘛，这是我说相声嘛，这是相声，语言艺术啊，说学逗唱都会。And then,
你的口音好像是北京。
So and I specifically put on like, 我可以说的标准一点，刚才带着口音是有原因的啊，我跟你玩，So like I have a purpose for using the dialect there because it's supposed to just blow that whole game out of the water.
That may sound easy as a one-time shtick, a gimmick. But how does humor help him find his place as an outsider in China?
Looking into humor has been a way to connect to people through performing, but it's also been a way of finding a community of like-minded Chinese people who are the type of people that you sit down and you make jokes together and you run off bits and you figure stuff out, and they're your tribe. And it's finding your tribe in another country with people that were born in another place and they had different passports, and your life experience is different, but they're still your tribe.
Now, what do you think makes people in China laugh? Now, that was your mission. I mean, think about that. I mean, is it about any aspects of the modern living? Is it food they eat? Housing? Problems with transport? The subway? Relationship? Dating?
Comedy in every culture, as far as I've been able to tell, is not necessarily about what you do, it's about how you do it. So all the topics you gave, if you're the type of person that can genuinely connect to the audience through talking about problems on the subway, you'll get an empathic connection because most people who live in major cities also probably have those problems. But it's not that there's anything magic about the subway. It's about your ability as a performer to connect with the audience through that topic. But if you're doing stand-up, or you're just trying to be funny in a conversation with somebody from another country, who you are is really important. Who you are is what the audience parses as what's authentic. And people being authentic makes people put their guard down and be interested. And that's what makes people laugh, is when they get comfortable and they feel like they're really connecting with somebody.
So are you saying that sometimes they laugh because they feel comfortable with you?
If you have everybody be comfortable, then basically everything you say is funny.
因为到冬天了，那个圣诞节快来了，你那个有人过圣诞节吗？有啊，有的过，有的不过。你手懒人，你过吗？哦，没有过，这是照消息的消息。
And during a stand-up act, how would he meet his audience halfway?
They'll ask you, where are you from? How long have you been in China? Why are you here? Do you enjoy China? Do you use chopsticks? The 5 basic questions, 10 basic questions. You need to answer all those questions because the audience doesn't know you. Mm-hmm. But you have the mic. They don't have the mic. So you have to tell the answers to all those jokes through comedy. So if I use the first 2 or 3 minutes to establish I'm an American, I live in China, I do comedy for my career, I enjoy living here, I have friends, Chinese friends that also do this comedy, perhaps you're even in my comedy club. Once they know that, they're like, okay, I get this guy. Because if you don't do that, the audience is not going to be happy.
Once they're listening, the challenge is to be authentic and credible.
So what I've found for me, and again, this is very much influenced by being a white performer doing Chinese comedy in China, is that any current event, the joke is that I even know about it. They're not really interested in what I think about Fan Bingbing disappearing. They're amazed I know Fan Bingbing disappeared. The nature of being a foreigner is that you don't understand how China works. That's what foreigners are.
But even when you start speaking in Chinese,
when you start speaking in Chinese, people take, again, you're going from 0 to 100. So if, for instance, let's say something's happening in Europe. Let's say there's a strike in France. I have more like 话语权. I have more
credibility.
I have more credibility to talk about Europeans than I do about Chinese people.
话语权.
Because they could understand the idea that I know what's going on in Europe, even though I've never lived there, better than the idea that I truly understand what's going on in China.
What surprises you that gets people in China laugh?
I think anything that's really true and authentic and not hack, for lack of a better term. If your subway story is a real subway story, people get really into it. If they feel like you're doing this because you want to tell like duanzi, you want to tell like jokes, then that defeats the whole purpose why people go to a live comedy show. Because like all of this mainstream media is to some degree 套路. It's all to some degree hack in China because it's really, really difficult to get authentic voices onto any large media stream in China. For me, I've kind of evolved into more of a like observational comic in China because one, people are interested in my observations. Even if they don't trust me that the observations are true, they're interested. And two, that those observations are tied to my identity as being an American in China because the Chinese audience won't have it any other way. That's what they're expecting from 30 plus years of, there's never been a foreigner on Chinese media who is doing entertainment because of the quality of the entertainment. It's always been either through subtext or through actual context because they're a foreigner.
As a foreigner, Jesse's performance in Mandarin Chinese, especially rapid-fire tongue twister with the Beijing accent, always gets big laughs, even as the content may be plain or simple.
真的，不管你是什么地方，不管你是来自太平洋、印度洋、大西洋、北冰洋、欧洲、亚洲、非洲、美洲、大洋洲、东亚、南亚、西亚、东南亚、韩国、朝鲜、蒙古、日本、越南、印度、缅甸、老挝、新加坡、菲律宾、尼泊尔、印度尼西亚、孟加拉、亚美尼亚、斯里兰卡、冰岛、丹麦、瑞典、巴拿马、波兰、捷克、德国、法国、奥地利、乌克兰、南亚、匈牙利、南斯拉夫、摩尔多瓦、比利时、爱沙尼亚、勒托维亚、玻利维亚、阿尔巴尼亚、贝宁、埃及、多个、刚果、利汤加、科买、罗摩洛哥、甘比亚、萨比亚、赤道几内亚、澳大利亚、新西兰、萨尔瓦多、尼加拉瓜、我们刚才墨西哥、美国、加拿大。
You almost are saying the nature of you being foreigner
it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Of itself funny.
It is not necessarily funny, but it sucks attention.
Are there any aspects of your American Jewish identity that could be used for material that...
Oh, yeah. I have a whole shtick on being Jewish in China. I actually have two shticks. I have one shtick that I do for Jews about being Jewish in China. I actually have like a whole separate show that I've done at like Jewish community centers and that sort of thing. So if you're at a Jewish community center and you're hearing this, you can book me. But I also have a set of jokes that I do for Chinese about being Jewish, because most of which are based around this theme, which is that Chinese people are very interested in Jews, which is true.
Why is that? What do they share in common, you think, in terms of personality, traits?
So here's the thing. There are things, I really do think that there are traits in common between Jewish culture and Chinese culture. These are not the things that Chinese people think are similar in Jewish culture and Chinese culture. The things that I kind of see as similarities are a focus on learning as a civilization. Mm-hmm. I have a bunch of Jewish material I know that definitely works. Some of it's really Chinese specific. Like I have a joke about like, Chinese people are really interested in the fact that I'm Jewish. One time a friend, came up to me and says, "Oh, wow, you're Jewish. No way. Like, my cousin's from Wenzhou." Which, of course, doesn't play in America. But Chinese people know that Wenzhouren, the Wenzhounese, are known as being the Jews of the East because they're so good at business.
Stereotype.
Yeah, it's all stereotype. And then I have a joke as a Jew. Jews have been fighting anti-Semitism for thousands of years. And then I go to China and people like me for being Jewish. And I just don't know how to deal with pro-Semitism. I've just never had that, People are like, why doesn't anyone like us? And the Chinese are like, we like you. And I'm like, oh, you don't like me. Like,
I'm used to not being liked.
I'm used to not being liked. Exactly.
As a teacher, writer, and performer of comedy, Jesse is walking the fine line of opening mind, creating art, and achieving commercial success.
I mean, I could just literally take a joke book and read the joke book and they laugh because they've never heard the jokes in an American joke book before.
So in a way, they're an easy audience because you're a foreigner.
It's a very easy audience if you want to play into the stereotypes of being a foreigner.
Do you?
I try to avoid it because it's just not fun. Unless my authentic experience is like, no, you guys are right. Like that, like if I really feel like, oh, like you guys have that stereotype and you are 100% right. That's funny.
Right.
It's also funny for me to say you have this stereotype and it's not quite right. And let me tell you why. Both of those are funny, but it has to be real to me.
What do people like?
People like laughing. So if people like good energy, people like connecting with the performers, people like you to be trying even if you don't get there. People like you to be understandable. They don't like the meta idea that they don't get what you're saying. People enjoy the effort and the goodwill you put into the product even more than the product for me, because it's always, again, I'm not Chinese. I'm never going to be. I can't be. So it's always going to be for the Chinese audience. The interesting thing about this show is just the fact there's an American doing comedy in Chinese.
And that is Jesse Appel. For more about Jesse, you can check out his website at laughbeijing.com. And that is our last episode for season 3 this year. We will take a break for a few months while we focus on developing a new format and relaunching next summer. Let us know if you want to join our team of volunteers, pitch a story. Just go to our website at oneinaBillionVoices.org. Click join or pitch a story. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Support for our podcast comes from our collaboration with the Victor and William Fung Foundation. On behalf of our entire team at One in a Billion,
Brian Latwinowicz,
Sarah Zhu, Yvette Yu,
we wish you a fantastic holiday and a fabulous season of joy, love, and wonder.